All right, so reading. So now that we're rolling with our phonics and our spelling and our parsing and our diagramming and our grammar and our mechanics, all these tools that we've given the kids to make them better communicators, let's see how we actually put these tools to work, okay? So first one, primary texts. In a classical school, we always start with a primary text, when we can. I shouldn't have said always. We do our best. So a primary text, it's a text at the source. It's not a textbook that quotes and borrows and paraphrases and summarizes from primary sources, but it's actually the original writing sort of at the source. And at the grammar stage, we think of primary texts as sort of these tried and true pieces that have proven their worth over the years. They qualify as good or even great literature. And you know the difference. Aesop's Fables is great literature, and the stuff on the back of your cereal box is not. So we're going to take a sample from the third reader. It's a description of the Johnstown flood of 1889, which killed 2,209 people. And I think I might as well just read it aloud because it's great for one thing and because it'll just help you sort of understand what I'm saying. So this is, like I said, it's from the third reader. It's from this little guy right here. This is just the reader series that we use. It's just, hardly any pictures. It's just straight text. But it takes the whole year to get through this because we do a lot with it. All right, so a hero is one who shows contempt of danger in the performance of some great or noble action. There have been heroes in all ages and in all nations, but none better deserves the name than one of our own time and our own country. On the summit of a hill which overlooks a valley, there was a large fish preserve or pond, almost as large as a lake. The wall of this pond had become weak in places, and at last giving way, the liberated water rushed in a torrent down the hill. Bridges were destroyed, houses were carried away, and men, women, and children perished in the flood. If an alarm could be given to those living within a short distance, many might be saved, but at such a time, everyone thinks only of saving himself. No, not everyone. There was one man who thought of others. He was young and wealthy, with everything to make life happy. He saw the coming water and knew the imminent danger. Springing to his horse, he galloped ahead, shouting to everyone he met, "Fly for your life, the flood is coming." He could hear the water as it leapt nearer and nearer, but on he rode, thinking only of others, and caring nothing for his own safety, till at last he was overtaken and drowned. That young man's name was Daniel Peyton, and he was quite as great a hero as Paul Revere. He should not be forgotten, for he gave his life to save others. So that's a typical example of what you're going to get in the third reader. So what's the first thing we do? We read it aloud to get sort of the overall sense of the text. We make the students take turns, and along the way we try to teach pacing, enunciation, posture, all the things eye contact, all the things necessary for good, effective reciting. So reading aloud is one form of what we call recitation, which in classical learning happens anytime a student speaks a text aloud, either from memory or from reading like I just did, and we try to train our students to recite well, okay? So the first thing to notice here is that the story opens with the description of a hero. Okay, now that's because at a classical Catholic school, one of our goals, as I said at the beginning, is moral formation. So we try to choose texts written for our learning, as St. Paul says. Now kids, they can read the pop paperbacks on their own time, but if they're going to be living their vocations as a student under our care, they're going to read something worth reading, okay? So once we get the overall sense of the text, the story, we start to look at the words that the students may not know. And we give them a specific set of tools for mastering new vocabulary. So this is called vocabulary drill. So here's how it works on the word contempt, which was in that first sentence. A hero is one who shows contempt of danger. Okay? First, we spell it. We do our phonetic analysis. Remember, I told you that would come up again? K, an, t, e, m, p, t. That's very simple. That's a very simple phonetic analysis. The only thing in here is the vowels. Those are the only ones that even have more than one sound. Next, we copy the model. We put it into our notebook. And this is called copybook. When you copy down from a model, it's a centuries-old method. Benjamin Franklin had a copybook. George Washington had a copybook. It goes back centuries, literally. And it's where students copy text into a notebook for further study and contemplation. Now, when a student copies a sentence word for word, just think about what he has to do. He has to accurately reproduce the spelling, the diction. He has to notice the structure. He has to grapple with every word. What a difference from just reading the thing. If you sat down and copied this thing, you would be retaining it in an entirely different way. It's a much more sensual experience than simply reading it and then moving on, okay? So once he's got, and all we're having him do is just this one sentence, the sentence, not the whole thing. I mean, we could have him copy the whole thing, but for this vocabulary exercise, this is the word we're looking at, and this is the sentence that we're going to write. That's the model. So now we notice the word's function in the model sentence. This is the third step of vocabulary drill. So this requires the grammatical knowledge that we get from parsing, like we did before. So I'll just do the beginning of it. A hero shows contempt of danger. Who shows contempt of danger? Hero. Subject, noun. What is being said about hero? Hero shows. Verb. Hero shows what? Contempt. Verify the noun. Does contempt mean the same thing as hero? No. Contempt, direct object, shows, verb transitive. So I asked that question because it tells you the difference between a transitive verb and a linking verb. That question, does it mean the same thing? I am a girl. That's a linking verb. Girl does mean the same thing as I. Hero, contempt, that doesn't mean the same thing. So that's a transitive verb. So now, and then, we would actually have them parse the whole thing, but we're just going to make it quick tonight. But we now know its role in the sentence. It's functioning as a noun, as a direct object. So the next step is to look the word up in the dictionary. Now, the part of speech, understanding the part of speech, I should have picked a sentence that shows this a little better, but it's absolutely critical because a kid has to know how that word is being used, because if you look in the dictionary, words often have multiple grammatical roles in a sentence. So they have to know, what is the function of this thing in the model sentence. So here, there's only really one meaning for contempt, and it means, so it's a noun, a direct object, it means scorn, and then the older kids would do an etymology check. It's from Latin contemptus, okay? And then finally, the sixth step is that the student then writes his own sentence based on the model sentence. And because he has the model sentence, it's not that hard to do. He can just sort of review how the word's being used and then come up with his own. My contempt for my brother's lack of generosity shocked him into submission. This might be, a sentence that a kid would come up with. It's very fun watching kids come up with these sentences. It's delightful. So now, obviously, this is sort of time consuming. So we only do this on a handful of words each day. But by the time, they do this with a reading and then another reading and then another reading, you might have 8 or 9 words by the end of the week that you can sort of sum up and drill and maybe even be quizzed on. And then at the end of 2 weeks, you've maybe got, 16 words. And at the end of the month, you can sort of, you're drilling maybe 30 words by this point. And then next month you can kind of start over. So, you're building up through repetitio, okay? Repetition. Repetitio mater studiorum. Repetition is the mother of learning. You're building up quite a good storehouse of vocabulary. And use whatever fun and games are necessary for the vocabulary drills. Do the fun thing we talked about with the phonics. Make it fun, make it competitive. So once we've got the words done, now we've done primary text, vocabulary drill. Now I just want to talk about discussion real quick. At this age, we can't really call discussion Socratic dialogue. I think you probably heard that phrase used in conjunction with St. Ambrose Academy, the older kids. Kids in the grammar stage, the Socratic dialogue is all about critical thinking and reasoning to a conclusion. Kids in the grammar stage, that's not what they're doing. They're just talking at this point about facts. They're not in the dialectic rhetoric stage yet, okay? So we talk about what the kid can observe in the text. And by doing this, it puts them constantly on the alert. They have to pay attention, they have to think, they have to respond. And it pays off down the road. I can tell the kids who have done a lot of discussion of texts and the kids who haven't. So we ask questions and we make sure they give articulate answers, and we keep pulling them back to the text. How does this author define hero? Yeah, where does he say that? Show me. Show me in the text. How does Daniel Peyton function as an example of heroism? What danger was he in? What noble action did he perform? And then we always try to ground the story in the faith when it's applicable. What does the author say the young man already had? Youth, wealth? Well, can you apply the scripture, greater love hath no man than to lay down his life for another, to this passage? So that's what you do when you're discussing at the grammar stage. You want to make sure they get the meaning of the story. All right, so we've read the text, we've analyzed its vocabulary and its meaning, and now it's time to work it. All right, we're not done with this text yet.